Hello, everybody. Welcome to Dishing with Stephanie's Dish, the podcast where we talk to people in the food space. Sometimes they write cookbooks. Sometimes they write a lot of cookbooks, like Beth Dooley. Beth, I thought of you this weekend because I was at a book signing with my husband at Paragus Outfitters in Ely. And
Oh, fun.
we were looking at the cookbook section with the gal that is the book buyer, and Perennial Plate was on the shelf, as was the Northland Kitchen. And you like had almost your whole section to yourself of just books. You've written so many.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, I intend to take over the whole bookstore.
Yes. I mean, you are like prolific because how many cookbooks have you written now? Is it like 11?
Well, not just my own, but I write cookbooks with other people. So around 13.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the latest cookbook that you wrote is with Will Steger.
Yes.
And so
And
that book is the Steger Homestead Kitchen, and it's with Will Steger and his niece, I believe.
That's right. Yes. She's wonderful. Rita May. She's
Okay.
adorable. She's young. She's got great energy, and she's half Chinese. She grew up going sort of living in between the US and sorry, half Vietnamese. She grew up living in between Vietnam and California. Her dad was in Vietnam, met and married a woman, fell in love with her. Her mom's name is Kim Chi, and they live in California, which is where Rita Mae grew up. But she goes back every year to visit her relatives, and she speaks Vietnamese fluently. And her food is wonderful because it's very rustic and it's very simple, but it's boldly seasoned and just really generous. She's lovely. So yeah, those are the recipes in the book. And then the stories in that book really come from Will, who experienced so much incredible hospitality when he's out on his adventures. He often ends up, going through these Inuit villages and meeting with people of all different stripes. And they always share with him everything that they have and insist that he takes the best of everything. And those are kind of the values that he brought back to the Steger Center. He wants to provide that kind of hospitality. So that's how that book came together. And of course, he's also about climate change. So he's very conscious of making sure that the recipes and the food that he serves, leave a really light footprint. So that's sort of what that book is about.
So how does that differ? So you collaborated on that book. So what did you literally do on that book that would be different from like your own book, Perennial Plate?
It's a great question. I'm more of the writer. So I try and, I spent hours and hours with Will, which is so much fun, talking with him, just hanging out with him,
Yeah,
getting
he's a
his
great
story.
storyteller.
Yeah, he is. And so his stories of, these incredible adventures that he's been on, as well as his stories growing up. He came from a huge family. There were 9 kids in his family, and his mother was a fabulous cook, but a really good sort of farm cook. She grew up on a farm. So he talked about those experiences of gathering everybody with his whole family, every single night. And God forbid if you were late for dinner, and all 12 or 13 of them would be seated promptly at 6 o'clock. And then his responsibility to clean up. And then because he had relatives that lived on farms, he was often working on a farm in the summer. So, again, he had those incredible experiences of growing up around really good local food, and then, being called to dinner with these big, with a big extended family. His falling in love with the wilderness, and his falling in love with being outside, and his first garden. He asked his mother if he could have a piece of her garden. She had a huge vegetable garden, and so she roped off a little piece for him, and he would sleep outside so he could hear the plants growing. I mean, they're just some wonderful stories that I thought were worth
funny. It has to be
all
kind of intimidating to listen or have a conversation with Will Steger. I'm imagining you record things and then trying to create that feeling in his words. Was that an intimidating process for you? Because I think it would be for me.
No, he's so generous,
Oh,
and he's so
nice.
easy to talk to, and he loves, he loves conversation. He loves being around people. He loves telling those stories. He's a good listener, and he tells other people's stories. So, I would just kind of, again, follow him around and type them out and then edit them so that they were in story form, because not everybody tells a story with a narrative arc. And so, he would then read them and correct me, or, I mean, and I've always done that with people. What I like doing is capturing their voice on the page. I want it to sound like them. So with Will and the other people that I work with, they always read what I've written before anything else happens. And then if they say that doesn't sound like me, I'm like, okay, good. Thank you for telling me that. Let's make it sound like you.
Yeah.
And go back and forth. And that's the fun of it. But the real fun for me too is listening for that story, because you can talk to somebody for hours and hours and you still don't quite have the story.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
you have to dig around and grab the meat of what it is they're talking about.
When I was working on my cookbook, my husband would, because he's a writer, and he would say, like, you need a beginning, a middle, and an end to all of these little pieces, right? You can't just ramble on.
Mm-hmm.
You are one of the first people locally that got me interested in food and that I admired in food. One of the first farm to table type of people that I ever met. And I met you at a farmer's market, and just the aesthetic that you had about how you cooked and the way you wanted to cook. And, you were kind of talking about the environment long before anybody else was, and about regenerative agriculture. And has your mission over the years stayed the same and you're just leaning into more of what you've always done, or has it changed as we've gotten more plant-based overall?
That's a great question. Thank you. And thank you for what you just said. I'm really very touched. Thank you. I'm thrilled. Thank you. Well, yes. And, the answer is yes and no. I mean, I became, it's kind of like you follow those threads through your life. And I became interested in local food really through Lucia Watson, who was kind of the first person to take farm to table really seriously. Right. And really, the other big kind of influence was joining a CSA, because I was forced to really respond to what's coming in, in that box. And one of the first things I did after I joined a CSA was to start writing their newsletter, which brought me out to their farm once a week so I could see what was going on, and I could see how people responded to it, and I could see what was happening. So those were kind of the biggest influences, and they remain with me today. But when I began to understand the impact of how food is grown on, not only flavor, but our health, and then began to follow the threads around environment, that's when I really became super interested in it. Because really, the more you understand about agriculture, the easier it is to see that conventional agriculture is probably the biggest contributor to climate change. And then once you begin to understand that was not a story I want to tell, because that's not really about food, right? So in researching the book collection of essays I wrote in Winter's Kitchen, I happened upon Don Wise, who is an agronomist at the University of Minnesota, and he's the founder of the Forever Green Initiative. And he's a remarkable man because he had long ago connected with Wes Jackson down at the Land Institute, who understood that if we're going to change how we grow food, we need to really give farmers something else to grow. And to me, that was the light bulb for me in wanting to know more about that, because all of a sudden that lifts the conversation of local food out of, all of the criticism it's gotten for being too expensive or too rarefied or too elitist, or, all those kinds of things. When you look at the fact that monocrops, corn and soy, cover almost 98% of our heartland, which is one of the most fertile areas on earth, and that we hold the world's fertility and we're burning it up with these fossil fuels, which are creating wars, then that story becomes much bigger than simply buying local food. And then, as somebody who was super interested in that, I became really interested in what those solutions might be, because, I'm kind of a Pollyanna, I'm kind of an optimist. I mean, we don't have to grow food this way. We really don't.
Right.
We've only been doing it, for a generation, a generation and a half maybe. And if it's taken us just a generation and a half to sort of screw everything up, it shouldn't take us that long to fix it. And so the work that the Forever Green Initiative is doing is to create continuous cover on the land. So it's to interrupt that monocrop system of annual plants that are, that are doing so much damage by washing all the topsoil into the Mississippi River, by killing all of the bees, by, and we know all this, by, poisoning our food, poisoning us, and not really growing food, growing crops to feed cattle, for instance, and growing crops for high fructose corn syrup, and growing, for plastics. I mean, it doesn't make sense, right? And so we don't have to grow food that way, because the Forever Green Initiative and the Land Institute and these other land grant universities are coming up with a variety of plants that can keep continuous cover on the land, that will allow us to change how we grow food, that they will actually capture carbon and drive it back down into the soil. They'll retain the topsoil, actually help build it up. And so there are different methods that we can use that can kind of lift us out of this cycle that we've been in for 60 years. So that's when it.
Yeah. And you mentioned that Lucia Watson kind of spurred your love of local food, and you guys worked on a cookbook, Savoring the Seasons of the Heartland, that is a book that I give everybody from Minnesota, just because I think it really speaks to our culture and our community. And also then now Perennial Plate is sort of your last cookbook. And in that, is that where you're kind of taking this regenerative approach and looking, I mean, besides Kernza, are there other grains people are working on?
Yeah, that's a great question. The Perennial Kitchen focuses on all these different foods. So, and it really tries to connect cooks and help them have an awareness of the foods that provide these ecological services. So yes, Kernza is one of them. But Kernza is kind of, in my mind, the poster child for this work, because it's easy. We all have an affinity for wheat, right? We all love wheat. We all love, or we may not love it because of gluten issues, but we all kind of understand that wheat is an iconic American crop. And it actually is the largest food crop that's grown around the world. Okay, so as an annual, it's pretty destructive. And so Kernza is a perennial wheat that behaves like a grass. It's like our lawns, right? And it comes up every year, and you can thresh it, and you can cook the whole grain, you can feed it to animals, you can mill it into flour. It's great stuff. But then there are lots of other things that are going on too that I wanted people to know about. One of them is hazelnuts. We have the capacity to grow so many hazelnuts in this area. They're tremendously regenerative. Our plant breeders are breeding them so that they'll be more productive, easier to harvest, a little bit bigger, and they actually taste better than anything that's coming out of Turkey, which are those filberts, which are really big.
Right.
And and Turkey is such a volatile region. Why are we buying things from Turkey when we can grow them here? And it's also, hazelnuts themselves are one of the fastest growing plant-based protein on the planet in terms of consumer demand. So we have tremendous opportunity to grow more hazelnuts here. We have lots of wonderful berry bushes. We have elderberries, we have currants, and a lot of them are not known to people, but they're delicious. They make wonderful foods. And so, again, those are the kinds of things you can grow in your gardens, but we want more farmers to grow those. The other thing we need are more sunflowers for oil, and
Right.
the U is working on perennializing sunflowers. There's another crop called camelina, which is a cousin of, it's another oil seed, and it's really wonderful. More antioxidants in it than does sunflower oil. And so that would be a wonderful crop. And that, again, makes a terrific cover crop. So we're looking for more of those crops, as well as grains, heritage barley, heritage oat, these heritage rye. I mean, we could be growing a lot more of those grains, and some of them are winter hardy. And so those could be planted. They can grow, underground through the winter and be harvested in the spring. So we're looking to get farmers to begin to rotating more of those crops onto their land, because again, farmers are businessmen, and they are not going to change their practices unless we are realistic and give them something else to grow.
And we also pay them to grow a lot of these commodity crops and then not even to use them, really. So unless we change some of the way that we distribute the money, the ag money, is a hazelnut farmer should get some of that money if he can do something. And maybe it's a slow weaning off of the corporate farm bill, I guess, as it were, because I'm not trying to, I think I'm not trying to demonize farmers, because what you said about we want these people to make a living and they need to grow the things that will do that for them. But at the same token, we can give them alternatives. We can
Exactly.
try to provide other opportunities, and particularly to maybe some of the younger farmers that are just starting out and looking at ways to do things differently.
Yes, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yeah. Yeah.
It's a really
Yeah.
important conversation too, I think, because there seems to be this feeling of demonizing the farmer. And
Mhm.
we really don't want to demonize the farmer, but we want to provide opportunity. And to continue to demonize the farmer or to continue to do things the way that farms have always done is not very inviting for young folks to get into farming.
It's hard because a lot of these farms are, we have a lot of retiring farmers. We have a lot of farmers that would like to keep their farms in production, and a lot of young people that are looking for land, and a lot of BIPOC folks that are looking for land. And wouldn't it be nice to re-energize our rural communities, repopulate our rural communities that have been decimated by conventional agriculture, so that they can bring back libraries and schools and Main Street, and maybe they could have internet highways so that those families don't have to drive their kids to McDonald's in order to do a term paper.
Yeah.
I mean, the solutions seem so obvious, but it's going to take the willingness of everybody, especially eaters like me and like you, that understand this and are willing to begin to, just have conversations around this so we can shift some of the dialogue.
Where are you? Are you working at all at the farmers market this summer?
I am. You're nice to ask. I'm actually working with the American Hazelnut people. So I'll be down there. They'll be there, I think, every other week. I've got a schedule, and I'll be doing some, cooking demos and stuff like that. And just talking to people about how to use the oil. It's fabulous oil. I mean, it's like, I think I call it our olive oil, because again, it's really high in antioxidants, and it's cold pressed, and it's got a higher smoke point than does our olive oil. So it's great stuff to work with, and it's got a lovely flavor.
I have a good question about that because I have a bottle of that hazelnut oil that I bought, but I don't use it. I kind of assumed that it was sort of like the other nut oils and a very specific use, but hearing you talk, maybe I should be using it like olive oil, it sounds like.
Use it like olive oil. It's really pretty shelf stable. You don't have to refrigerate it. And, it comes in a very dark bottle, so you don't have to really worry about having it in sunlight. I keep it actually in the cupboard right next to the stove so that I can just grab it and use it. And so I use it for sautés. I use it for salad dressings. I use it for baking. It's wonderful in baking. In fact, I used a recipe. It's a hazelnut cake, and it's a riff on an olive oil cake.
Oh, yeah.
And it has orange stuff. It's really good. Yeah. Yeah.
That Alice Waters olive oil cake is like a classic recipe.
Yeah. Yeah. So you can use, just substitute one for one using the hazelnut oil. And it's great. And you get that nice hazelnutty flavor. And if you throw some chopped hazelnuts in it, it's great that way too. And what I like about the American hazelnut oil is that those people that are running that are so sort of savvy. They toast the nuts, and you can buy the nuts toasted and ready to go. And you know what a pain hazelnuts are to work with. You have right? So you don't have to toast them. They're all ready to go. And they've got a more intense hazelnut flavor because they're a little smaller. But then they take the seconds that they can't bag and sell, and they press them for that oil, right? And then they take what's left and they mill that into flour. So you can get a gluten-free hazelnut flour as well.
Oh, nice. All right. I'm going to look for that. Have you been eating out anywhere exciting, or are you mostly cooking at home?
We're still mostly cooking at home, but there are a couple of places I really like. I love Heather's. I think her place is great. I think it's 54th in Chicago. Tammy Wong's just opened up Rainbow again, so you can go there and eat because
I did not know that. Hooray.
It's great, and she's amazing. She's at the Lindale Farmers Market every Saturday too. So I was down there yesterday. I was like, brought home lunch. It was so great.
She has the best pickles.
She does. Yes, she does. Her stuff is amazing. So it's been fun to go back there. We were at Terzo the other night, and there, and it's really cute because one of our sons went to school with Charlie Broder, and so he's yeah. So it's really fun to see that family, go. And
has the Broders at 50th and Penn reopened yet since the fire?
It hasn't reopened, and they don't have anything on their recording or on their website as to when it does. I know we're all really like chomping at the bit to get it. Get it open. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then are there any other, as long as I have you, are there any books or cookbooks that have come out or food books that you're excited about recently?
It's Grist, Grist, and it's by Abra Berens, Berens. She's a chef in Michigan and the UP, and she does beautiful food. She's got a restaurant up there, and it's Grist, a practical guide to cooking grains, beans, seeds, and legumes, and it's awesome.
Oh, I'm liking that. Yeah, look at it. It
Yeah.
looks hefty too.
Yeah, it's really hefty. Yeah, it's a chronicle book. And then, I mean, with everything going on in the world, in the world, I got interested in what's going on in the Ukraine. And this is not a new book, but it's beautiful. And it's called Summer Kitchens: Recipes and Reminiscences from Every Corner of Ukraine. And it's absolutely beautiful, and it's heartbreaking. And the recipes are gorgeous.
I bought that
And
book too.
you do? Yeah,
Yeah.
isn't it lovely?
And there's
Yeah,
great
yeah,
stories in there of just what it feels like to be in that place. And it
yeah,
is
yeah,
heartbreaking because you know that place won't be like that for,
yeah.
25 to 50 years. It's been decimated.
Yeah, it's really, and those kitchens, those summer kitchens are, I mean, they're so beautiful. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I definitely feel that. Well, Beth, it's been great to talk to you. I will catch up with you. I'll pop by one of the farmers markets and I'm going to get some more
Awesome.
hazelnut oil, and I'm really going to take that to heart and start cooking more with hazelnut oil. Thanks to you.
Awesome.
All
Oh,
right. We'll
thanks so
talk
much.
soon, Beth. Okay. Bye-bye.
That sounds great. Thank you. Bye-bye.